Be me Clyde, 38. Work as a systems engineer for a decent company. Not super exciting, but it's stable, pays well. Been married to my wife Sasha for about a decade. We met in our late 20s. Pretty standard story. She was smart, funny, passionate about things. I was the quiet, steady guy. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. We bought a house in the suburbs a few years back. 2 cars, a small yard, the whole 9 yards. I always considered myself a good husband. I'm not the type to cause drama or make a fuss. I handle the mortgage, the bills, the car payments, insurance. Basically all the big financial stuff. My salary covers everything, with enough left over to be comfortable. Sasha hasn't worked a traditional job in maybe 5 years. A little while ago, she got really into what she called her artistic mission. She wanted to create a community art space for women, a place where they could create and exhibit their work without the male gaze or whatever. Sounded a bit strange to me, but she was so excited about it. I figured, hey, if it makes her happy and we can afford it, why not? Love is about supporting your partner's dreams, right? So I became the sole benefactor of the project. I paid the rent on a small studio space downtown. I covered the costs for canvases, paints, clay, all that stuff. Whenever she needed something, a new easel, better lighting, marketing flyers, it all came out of my paycheck. I never complained. I'd get home from a 10-hour day of dealing with server meltdowns and buggy code. First thing I'd ask is, "How was your day at the studio, honey?" She'd go on for an hour about the new artist she met, the breakthrough she had with a sculpture, the drama between 2 of the painters. I'd listen, nod, and try to offer useful feedback. Often, I'd be the one making dinner while she talked. She'd be too emotionally drained from her creative work to cook. Again, I didn't mind. I enjoyed taking care of her. It felt like we were a team, and my role was to provide the stable foundation so she could fly. Over the last year or so, things started to change, but slowly. The language she used became different. It was full of buzzwords I'd only ever seen online. Everything was about patriarchal structures and toxic masculinity. A movie we'd watch would be problematic. A comment a neighbor made was a microaggression. She and her friends from the art studio would have these long, intense conversations on the phone. I could only hear her side, but it was always very angry and ideological. I tried to talk to her about it once, asked her if everything was okay. She just said I wouldn't understand because of my male privilege. It was like a wall went up. I decided to just let it be. People go through phases. As long as she was happy and we were good, I could deal with some weird new jargon. Our physical relationship had also been cooling off. It wasn't a sudden stop, more like a slow fade. Hugs became shorter. Kisses became a quick peck on the cheek. Intimacy in the bedroom became rare, then non-existent. I thought maybe it was stress from her project, or maybe we were just in a rut like long-term couples sometimes are. I tried to be more romantic, bring her flowers, suggest date nights. She'd usually smile and thank me, but then say she was too tired or had too much on her mind. I felt a growing distance between us, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a normal evening a few months ago. I had just finished making a pretty good lasagna from scratch. We were sitting at the dinner table. I was talking about a potential promotion at work. Sasha was unusually quiet, just pushing her food around her plate. When I finished talking, she looked up at me. Her expression was dead serious. She said, "Clyde, we need to talk about the structure of our relationship." My stomach did a little flip. That kind of language never leads to anything good. She proceeded to give me what sounded like a prepared speech. It was calm, measured, and completely devoid of any emotion. She told me that she had been doing a lot of reading and self-reflection. She had come to the conclusion that physical affection in a marriage was often a performance expected of women, a tool of the patriarchy to ensure male comfort and control. I just stared at her, not understanding where this was going. Then she dropped the bomb. She announced that, for her own mental health and to reclaim her bodily autonomy, she was ceasing all forms of physical affection. Indefinitely. No more sex, obviously, but also no more kissing, no more hugging, no more holding hands, no more cuddling on the couch while watching a movie. Nothing. I was stunned into silence. My first thought was that she was breaking up with me. But then she clarified. She said this didn't change her commitment to our partnership. She still expected us to live together, share our lives, and be a team. And, she added, she expected me, as a modern and enlightened man, to understand and support her decision. She said a true ally would respect her boundaries without question. My brain couldn't process it. I asked, "So, you want us to be roommates who are married?" She bristled at that. "No, Clyde. I want us to be partners, but our partnership needs to evolve beyond these outdated physical expectations. Our connection should be emotional and intellectual." I asked her if this was because of something I did. Did I do something to upset her? She sighed, that condescending sigh I was starting to know so well. "This isn't about you," she said. "It's about me. It's about breaking free from systemic conditioning. I thought you, of all people, would support my journey." The meal was finished in absolute silence. I cleaned up the kitchen like a robot, my mind racing. This had to be a test, right? Or some bizarre phase that would pass in a week. The next few days were the most awkward of my entire life. I'd wake up in the morning and instinctively roll over to put an arm around her, then remember. I'd get home from work and stop myself halfway to giving her a hug. The house felt like it had been encased in ice. She, on the other hand, seemed almost relieved. She was cheerful, chatty about her art project, seemingly oblivious to the crushing emotional void she had created. She acted like everything was perfectly normal. One evening, she was showing me pictures on her phone of a new sculpture one of her friends had made. I instinctively put my hand on her shoulder to get a better look. She flinched away like I had an electric current running through my fingers. "Boundaries, Clyde," she said, her voice sharp. I felt a hot flush of shame and anger. Shame for making a mistake, and anger that a simple, loving gesture was now a mistake. I tried to talk to her again. I sat her down and tried to explain how this made me feel. I told her that for me, physical touch was how I felt connected and loved, that a marriage without it felt empty and cold. I wasn't just talking about sex, but all of it, the small, everyday things. She listened patiently, with a look on her face like a therapist listening to a troubled patient. When I was done, she told me that my feelings were a result of toxic masculinity, that society trains men to equate physical intimacy with validation and ownership. She suggested I might want to interrogate those feelings, and maybe even read a few articles she could send me. I was speechless. My genuine emotional pain was being dismissed as a sociological symptom. It wasn't real. It was just my conditioning. I felt utterly alone. I was living in a house with my wife, but I had never felt more isolated. This went on for a couple of weeks. I was miserable. I was walking on eggshells in my own home. The one person I was supposed to be able to turn to for comfort had become the source of my misery. And the worst part was, I was still expected to perform all my other duties. I still paid for everything. One morning, she casually mentioned that the studio's rent was due and that she also needed a few $100s for a new batch of expensive German paints. I just nodded numbly and transferred the money from our joint account, an account which, I might add, was only funded by my salary. I felt like a fool. A walking ATM with no emotional benefits. The breaking point came when I reached out to my best friend. We've known each other since college. He's a no-nonsense kind of guy, works in construction, very down-to-earth. We met up for a beer after work one night. I hadn't planned on telling him everything, but after one drink, it all just came spilling out. The speech, the new rules, the buzzwords, the condescending tone, the money. I expected him to be shocked, or maybe to laugh at the absurdity of it. He wasn't. He just listened, his expression getting harder and harder. When I finished, he took a long sip of his beer and looked me straight in the eye. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "She has unilaterally canceled the core parts of the marriage agreement: affection, intimacy, partnership in the truest sense. But she still expects you to hold up your end of the bargain, which is funding her entire life and being her emotional support animal." Hearing him put it so bluntly was like a punch to the gut. But it was also exactly what I needed to hear. "I guess so," I mumbled. "That's not a marriage, Clyde," he said, shaking his head. "That's a service contract where you're the only one providing a service. She's not your wife anymore. She's your tenant, and a damn expensive one at that." He went on. "You can't argue with this stuff, man. It's like a cult. You can't use logic to reason someone out of a position they didn't use logic to get into. Trying to tell her how you feel is pointless. To her, your feelings are just proof that she's right about the patriarchy." Everything he said resonated with a terrible clarity. He was right. I had been trying to fix a relationship problem, but this wasn't a relationship problem. This was an ideological takeover. Sasha wasn't my partner anymore. She was my warden, and I was a willing prisoner. "So what do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "Simple," my friend said. "You accept her new reality. You agree to her terms, but you apply them to everything." I didn't understand. She wants to be partners who live together, but without the physical side of marriage? Fine. You're now partners, business partners, and in a business partnership, everything is transactional, 50-50. A light bulb went on in my head. It was a cold, dim, fluorescent light bulb, but it was light nonetheless. "She wants autonomy," he continued. "She wants to be free from patriarchal expectations. Great. That includes the patriarchal expectation that the husband pays for everything. Give her the autonomy she's begging for, full, unadulterated autonomy." We talked for another hour, hashing out the details. I left the bar that night feeling completely different. The sadness and confusion were gone. They were replaced by a strange, cold resolve. The fog had lifted. I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to yell or scream or issue any ultimatums. I wasn't going to try and talk it out again. I was just going to accept the new terms and conditions of our arrangement. I got home late. Sasha was on the couch, laptop on her lap, probably reading more articles about how terrible men are. She glanced up when I came in. "You're late," she said, a hint of accusation in her voice. "Went out with a friend," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I didn't offer any more information. I just went to the kitchen, got a glass of water, and went to our bedroom. Well, my bedroom now, I guess. The next morning, I woke up early. I went to my computer and did something I should have done a long time ago. I logged into my online banking. I had my salary direct deposited into our joint checking account. I changed that. I set it up so my paycheck would now go into a new, separate checking account that I opened right then and there. An account only in my name. Then I looked at our joint account's balance and our monthly expenses. I calculated exactly half of the mortgage, half of the utilities, half of the internet bill, half of the car insurance. I left just enough in the joint account to cover my half for the upcoming month. I transferred the rest, a significant amount of money, into my new private account. Then I went about my morning routine as usual. I was making coffee when Sasha came into the kitchen. She was in her silk robe, looking refreshed. She smiled brightly at me, as if nothing was wrong in the world. "Morning," she said. "Hey, could you do me a favor? I need to order a new lighting rig for the studio. It's on sale, but only for today. Could you transfer about $800 over to the studio account?" This was it, the first test. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I looked at her, my expression calm. "No," I said. Her smile faltered. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no. I will not be transferring that money," I said, my voice even. "But the project needs it. I need it." "I understand," I said, "and I'm happy to pay for my half." She stared at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Your half?" "Yes, $400. I will contribute my share. You'll have to cover the other $400. I could see the gears turning in her head, struggling to compute what I was saying. "What are you talking about, Clyde? I don't have $400. You know I don't have an income. You always cover the project's expenses." "That's true," I agreed. "That was part of our old arrangement, but we have a new arrangement now. We are partners, intellectually and emotionally connected, but without the physical and, by extension, the financial entanglements of a traditional marriage. You wanted to deconstruct the old norms. This is part of that." Her face went from confused to angry. "This is ridiculous. Are you punishing me? Is this because of the boundary I set?" "Not at all," I said calmly, taking another sip of coffee. "I'm respecting your boundary. I'm embracing it. You wanted a different kind of partnership, and I'm giving it to you. A partnership of equals, and equals split the expenses." She was sputtering now, her face turning red. "You're throwing my words back in my face. This is a hostile act. This is financial control." "On the contrary," I said, rinsing my mug and placing it in the dishwasher. "This is financial liberation. I'm liberating you from the patriarchal expectation of being provided for. You're an independent woman with her own important project. I'm just treating you like one." I grabbed my work bag and headed for the door. "I'm going to be late for work," I said. "By the way, the mortgage payment is due next week. My half is already in the joint account. You'll need to deposit your half before then. Have a good day." I walked out the door, closing it softly behind me, leaving her standing there in the kitchen, utterly speechless. As I drove to work, I didn't feel angry or triumphant. I just felt quiet. The war had begun, but I hadn't fired a single shot. I had simply agreed to the rules of engagement she had laid out. The next phase of my life was starting, and for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't a victim in my own story. I had a plan, and I was going to see it through to the end. The drive to work was the quietest it had been in years. I wasn't listening to the radio or a podcast, just the hum of the engine. I expected my phone to start buzzing immediately, but it didn't. Silence. It was almost more unsettling than an angry text. I got to my office, sat down, and focused on my work. For the first time in a long time, my mind wasn't preoccupied with drama at home. It was just calm. The first text arrived around lunchtime. "I can't believe you would do this. This is financial abuse. You are trying to control me by withholding resources." I read it, put my phone down, and continued eating my sandwich. I didn't reply. A few minutes later, another one. "My friends are right about you. When a woman sets a boundary, a man's first instinct is to punish her for it. This is classic toxic masculinity." I read that one and almost laughed. She was literally proving my friend's point. I finished my lunch and went back to work. The texts kept coming throughout the afternoon. A mix of accusations, threats to tell everyone how I was treating her, and pseudo-psychological analysis of my supposed failings as a man. It was like watching a machine malfunction. It was just spitting out all the phrases she had programmed into it. I ignored them all. When I got home that evening, the house was dark and quiet. Sasha was in the living room, sitting on the couch in the dark. She had been crying. She looked up at me, her face puffy. She tried a different tactic. "Clyde," she said, her voice soft and wounded, "how could you be so cruel? I'm your wife. We're supposed to support each other." I switched on the light and put my bag down. "I am supporting you," I said calmly. "I'm supporting the new structure of our partnership, the one you designed. I never said I wanted you to bankrupt my project. I never said I wanted you to starve me out." "You said you wanted to be autonomous," I replied, heading to the kitchen. "Autonomy involves financial responsibility. I didn't make that rule. Society did." I opened the fridge. I had bought some groceries for myself on my lunch break: a steak, some asparagus, a potato. I started preparing my own dinner. She followed me into the kitchen, her voice rising. "So that's it? You're just going to cook for yourself now? What am I supposed to eat?" I didn't even look at her. "There's a pantry full of food, Sasha, and several grocery stores in a 2-mile radius. I assume your half of the money is still in your bank account, since you haven't contributed to the mortgage yet." That shut her up. She just stood there, watching me in disbelief as I seasoned my steak. I ate my dinner at the kitchen island, reading the news on my phone. She ended up making herself some toast and went back to the living room. The silence in the house was a physical presence. It was heavy and cold. This became our new routine. I would go to work, come home, make dinner for myself, and then spend the evening in my home office, reading or working on a personal coding project I'd neglected for years. I started going to the gym again after work. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed it. The simple focus of lifting weights, of pushing my own limits, was a kind of therapy. I was getting stronger, physically and mentally. Sasha, meanwhile, was falling apart. Her project was the first casualty. She couldn't make rent on the studio. I know because I got a call from the landlord asking why the payment was only half of what it should be. I politely explained that I was only responsible for my half of the lease agreement I had co-signed, and he would have to contact the primary leaseholder, Sasha, for the rest. A week later, I saw an eviction notice taped to the studio door when I drove past. She didn't tell me about it, but I could hear her on the phone at night, arguing with the landlord, then tearfully trying to explain the situation to her friends. From what I could gather, she asked them for help. Not just a little help, but for them to collectively chip in to cover the rent and costs to keep the studio afloat. I'm sure she presented it as a vital feminist collective that needed to be saved from a spiteful husband. It didn't work. Her friends offered plenty of "you go girl" and "stay strong queen" messages. But when it came to actual money, they all had excuses. One had student loans. Another was saving up for a trip. A third just straight up said she couldn't afford it. The sisterhood was strong in spirit, but very weak in the wallet. The art project, her entire identity for the past 5 years, collapsed in a matter of weeks. She had to go and clear out her things from the studio. I didn't offer to help. I came home one evening, and the garage was filled with boxes of canvases, sculptures, and art supplies, all paid for by me. With the project gone, she had nothing to do all day. She just sat at home, stewing in her own resentment. She tried to pick fights with me. She'd criticize the way I loaded the dishwasher. She'd complain that I was leaving the lights on in my office. She'd make passive-aggressive comments about how it must be nice to just escape to work all day. I refused to engage. I would just look at her, give a non-committal nod, and walk away. It was like being a gray rock. You can't argue with a rock. The emotional emptiness of the house was starting to get to her in a way the financial problems hadn't. She was used to being the center of my attention. Even when she was complaining, she was the focus. Now, she was nothing. I would walk past her like she was a piece of furniture. My emotional energy was no longer a resource she could tap into at will. I had closed the account. One night, I was on a video call with my friend. the one who gave me the advice. We were laughing about something. Sasha walked past the open door of my office. She stopped and stared at me. Her expression was one of genuine shock. It was like she had just seen a ghost. I think it was the first time she had heard me laugh in over a month. And I wasn't laughing with her. I was sharing a moment of happiness with someone else. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear. She was realizing that I wasn't just punishing her. I was moving on. I was building a life without her, even while living in the same house. The mortgage payment deadline was approaching. She hadn't mentioned it. I assumed she was either hoping I'd forget, or that I'd just cave and pay the full amount. I didn't either. The day before it was due, I left a note on the kitchen counter. Reminder: your half of the mortgage, $1,250, needs to be in the joint account by tomorrow for the auto payment. That evening, she approached me while I was reading in the living room. She was holding the note. Her hands were trembling. "I don't have it, Clyde," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I looked up from my book. "That's a problem," I said. "If the payment doesn't go through, it will affect both of our credit scores." "Well, what do you expect me to do? I don't have a job." "I know," I said, "but you're a smart, capable woman. You could find one. Or you could sell some of your art supplies in the garage. There's a lot of value in there. Enough to cover your half for a few months while you get on your feet." The look of horror on her face was profound. The idea of selling her sacred art supplies to pay for something as mundane as a mortgage was sacrilege. "You want me to sell my passion? The pieces of my soul?" "I'm not telling you what to do," I said, turning a page in my book. "I'm just offering solutions to the problem you've presented. You need money. You have assets. It seems straightforward." She started to cry. Not angry, performative tears this time. Real, desperate sobs. "Please, Clyde," she begged. "Just pay it this one time. I'll figure something out for next month, I promise." This was the moment of truth. The old me, the me from 2 months ago, would have caved instantly. I would have hated seeing her cry. I would have felt guilty and just paid it to make the problem go away. But that me was gone. I looked at her, my face a blank mask. "No," I said. "The rules are the rules. We are equal partners. I paid my half. You need to pay yours." She stared at me, her mouth open, the tears still streaming down her face. I think in that moment, she finally understood. She understood that I was serious, that this wasn't a game, that the man who had unconditionally supported her for a decade was gone, and in his place was a stranger who was simply enforcing the terms of a contract she had written. She ran to the bedroom and slammed the door. The next day, I got a notification from the bank that the mortgage had been paid in full. A few hours later, I saw a new listing on Facebook Marketplace. It was a photo of her professional grade easel and the expensive German paint set. The listing was under her name. She had done it. She had sold a piece of her soul to keep a roof over her head. I didn't feel any satisfaction. I just felt empty. This wasn't a victory. It was just the logical conclusion of a failed system. The atmosphere in the house changed after that. The anger was gone, replaced by a thick, heavy blanket of despair. Sasha was a ghost. She would drift from room to room aimlessly. She stopped talking to her friends. She just existed. I continued my routine: work, gym, home, projects. I was building a future for myself. I was looking at apartments online, talking to a financial advisor about separating assets. I was making plans. She wasn't. She was trapped in the present she had created. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the garage, sorting through some old tools. Sasha came to the door. She had a cup of coffee in her hand. "I made you some coffee," she said softly. I looked at the cup, then at her. It was the first nice gesture she had made towards me in months. A peace offering. "I don't drink coffee in the afternoon," I said, turning back to my toolbox. "But thank you." I didn't take the cup. I heard her stand there for a full minute before she slowly turned and walked back into the house. A few nights later, it all came to a head. I was in the living room watching a hockey game. She came and sat on the other end of the couch. She didn't say anything for a long time. The only sound was the game on the TV. Then she spoke. "I miss you," she whispered. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the screen. "I miss this," she said, her voice cracking. "I miss us." I took a deep breath. I muted the TV and turned to face her. Her eyes were filled with a desperate, pleading hope. "There is no us anymore, Sasha," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You made that very clear. Us required things you were no longer willing to provide: love, affection, respect, partnership." "I can bring it back," she said, leaning forward. "I was wrong. I was listening to the wrong people. I see that now. We can go back to how things were." I almost felt a pang of pity for her. Almost. "We can't," I said, "because you showed me the truth. Our old relationship wasn't a partnership. It was a transaction where I provided everything, and you graced me with your presence. You weren't a wife. You were a kept woman who happened to share my last name. The only thing you've lost is your provider. You don't miss me. You miss my support." Every word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall between us. She recoiled as if I had physically struck her. "That's not true," she sobbed. "I love you." "No, Sasha," I said, standing up. "You don't. You don't even know what that word means. You just know that you're cold, and you're lonely, and you're broke, and you want things to be warm and easy again. But you were the one who set the house on fire." I stood there, looking down at the broken woman on the couch who used to be my wife, the woman I had loved and given everything to, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound, irreversible finality. The game was over, and she had lost.